So, welcome to today's show. If we're meeting for the first time, on this channel, I provide information to help those that travel with challenges travel better. I try to share information for their friends and families as well. My name is Ken Edmonds, and today I have with me Ron Pettit from Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. And Ron is going to talk to us about accessibility. So, Ron, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you, Ken, for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Ron Pettit, and I'm the Director for Disability Inclusion and ADA Compliance for Royal Caribbean Group, which is basically the parent company of two global cruise brands, Royal Caribbean International and Celebrity Cruises. I've been here for about 15 years, and I head up all of our efforts to provide a disability inclusive cruise line, not only for our guests, but our employees, as well as digital experiences. My team of about 20 people cater to the disability market. Most of this team is dedicated to pre-cruise contact center for our guests and travel agent partners in planning accessible cruise vacations and accessible shore excursions.
Okay, so let me start with, I have some questions prepared here. And the first one is, and I hear this across all cruise lines, is that there seems to be not enough accessible cabins. So what would you suggest for passengers that need an accessible cabin?
Well, I think that my recommendation would be is to identify the ship that you want to sail on. At Royal Caribbean Group, we have some of the largest cruise ships in the world, and therefore we have a lot of accessible stateroom inventory. And so I think there's always options to obtain an accessible stateroom. Guests and travel partners can shop for, and book accessible staterooms online, and they can do that as soon as we deploy the sailing. The accessible stateroom inventory is available, and people can shop and book for them. They can always call us if they're trying to find an accessible stateroom and there doesn't seem to be one available. We can validate guests in accessible stateroom, make sure they truly do have a need. We do reserve accessible staterooms solely for guests with disabilities, but there does come a point in time where all the standard staterooms have been allocated, and then accessible staterooms have been allocated, and we can release the accessible staterooms to other guests. So at that time, we may be able to move guests around if the opportunity arises that we do have an accessible guest that truly needs an accessible room for that particular sailing.
Okay, and so I'm going to guess that you would encourage them to start thinking about their trip early, because I
Yeah,
would think that planning ahead is the key.
yeah, I mean, planning ahead is key. I think that, people can plan their cruises at whatever time. It's not to say that people with disabilities should plan vacations earlier, but they should do their planning, because I think that there's a lot of options to consider, not only picking the right cruise line, but the right ship and the right destinations to try to optimize your, vacation experience. You want it to be the best vacation you have. So you want to take the time to plan.
Okay, thank you. So are there some of your ships that have more accessible staterooms than others?
Well, we have a wide variety of ships in our fleet. We have Vision class to have at least 14 accessible staterooms, all the way to the world's largest cruise ships in Oasis class, which has 46 accessible staterooms in a variety of categories. So we have accessible staterooms in inside, ocean view, balcony, and suite categories. Oasis class has 33 balcony staterooms. Now, 8 of these will, instead of having a water view, they will face our neighborhood. So 4 of these staterooms will face Central Park. So it's like a lush garden feel. And then the other 4 balcony staterooms that overlook the neighborhood will look over a boardwalk, kind of like New Jersey, a city boardwalk with a carousel. They can see the shows at the Aqua Theater. So these are really great options. And then the 26 balcony rooms face the water. So really great on Oasis class ships where you have a lot of balcony accessible stateroom options.
Yeah, and I think that your concept of the inside balconies is pretty cool. I haven't had the opportunity to be. I'll tell you how far back I go. The last Royal Caribbean ship I was on was Viking Serenade in the early
Oh,
90s.
wow. Yeah.
But I left the travel industry for a while, and then after I retired, I came back to doing a little bit of travel sales, but to do a lot of travel videos. And so I've studied all the ships, I've watched the videos, so I'm so looking forward to hopefully this year being a better year and I can get a chance to get on board. Okay.
Yeah. And speaking of inside staterooms with a view, when Royal Caribbean launched Voyager class, remember way back, Voyager class, that was a game changer for the cruise industry. And that introduced the Royal Promenade. And that was the first time we introduced inside staterooms with a view because we had inside accessible staterooms overlooking the Royal Promenade, which if you've been on a Voyager class, Freedom class ships with the Royal Palm, I love to people watch, and it's amazing. And so these accessible staterooms overlook the promenade. It's a very different view of the cruise.
The one nice thing about those kinds of inside cabins is the fact that once you can open a curtain and see out, it's not quite as confining, let's say, as inside. Now, my wife and I, we're kind of abnormal because we like an inside because you can get totally dark, and when you want to sleep, you can sleep really good. We had a little bit of a challenge on a cruise we were on in Alaska where we had a balcony, and that the light came up pretty early in the morning, and by May the light's up really early and it stays up really late, and my wife doesn't sleep well with the light. But anyway, I'll get away from my stories. I have lots of them. Okay, so do you require proof of need for an accessible cabin? In other words, do you require passengers to certify that they need the cabin?
So no, we don't require proof. I mean, we don't require accessible parking placard. We don't require a doctor's note. No, we do ask that a guest attest in writing the need for accessible staterooms, and they can do that by filling out our special needs form. And they can do that online at royalcaribbean.com/special needs form, all one word. And it's an online form. There's a box for them to check off, say, I require an accessible stateroom because of my disability.
Okay. All right. So at least you do something to keep, because the next question was, I know people that talk about in some of the forums about booking accessible rooms because they like all the extra space. And as somebody that needs an accessible room, that I find frustrating, and I tend to vent a little bit in the forums when somebody says something about that.
Well, it's a really great point there, you can. So we changed our system about over 10 years ago to allow guests to book and shop and book accessible staterooms online. And when we did that, we were concerned about this particular issue. So we do qualify our guests for these rooms. We ask them to attest that they need a room because of a disability. If they go over the phone, we're may double check to make sure that there's some other qualifying information, say that they're bringing a wheelchair, a scooter, they have a need for the room. I need to use the grab bars. I need the wider doors because of my equipment. Those are all really great and valid reasons for wanting an accessible stateroom. And we find that when we made this change, it reduced the amount of moves that we had to make. Before the change, guests and travel agents can only request an accessible stateroom by calling in. And we were still getting requests, and we were doing a lot of movement as we got closer and closer to sailing. Nowadays, we don't do that as much. And so the reason we feel like is we've qualified the guests for the room, and the right people are getting the right rooms at the right time.
And that's a really good plan. Some of the other cruise lines that I've talked with do that. And I think that works really well. And again, the one thing I would encourage, I encourage this for all passengers, but especially for those that travel with challenges, I would encourage you to find a local travel agent or find somebody that you can work with that has an understanding about the process, because they bring a lot to the table for you and that they can share information. I know for people that I book, that I look up the size of the cabin and try to find as much information if they need an accessible. Again, depending on the cruise line, some cruise lines have a variety of different types, some are all the same. But I try to make sure that I match the passenger to the right cabin. And as we go into some of these other areas, this filling in your special needs form becomes really important to make sure that the cruise line is aware. So we'll talk about that as we go on in some of the questions. By the way, if you're getting value out of this discussion today, do me a favor, hit the like button. That lets YouTube know there's content worthwhile on it, and they'll share it with others. And if you haven't done so, I always appreciate a subscribe. So thank you. Let's go on to my next question. Let's talk about excursions, because this can be, for people that travel with scooters and with wheelchairs, this can be a real challenge sometimes. So, do you have excursions that are accessible, and if so, how do passengers find them?
So that's a really great question, Ken. And we have offered a lot of accessible shore excursions. About 10 years ago, we introduced the industry's first easy tours. These are wheelchair accessible tours, and they're like half day tours. They're sort of like those hop on, hop off tours. You're seeing the city from a bus. So basically, it's a great, we call them panoramic tours, where you see all the sights of the city. You might get off once or twice during the tour. And so these are really affordable tours and a really good way to see the destination. Then we have sometimes the other extreme where we have these private, completely customized tours. We call these private journeys. And so there you're going to get your own vehicle for you and your traveling party. You're going to get your own driver and guide. The itinerary is completely customizable. You can do whatever you want, but it's going to come at a cost. So there's the extremes. And so we've been working with a company called Accessible Travel Solutions. They're based in the United States in Houston. The owner is John Sage, is a wheelchair user. He and his team have personally vetted all the tours they work with. So Accessible Travel Solutions, it's the parent company of all these tour operators that provide accessible tours in Europe, the Caribbean. I think today we have up to about 35 to 40 different tours with Accessible Travel Solutions, and we keep expanding them. And how can guests and travel agents book these tours? They book them through Royal Caribbean. So remember, I talked about my pre-cruise contact center. About half of them to work with the onboard experience, but the other half is my accessible shore excursion team, which I like to call as concierge service. They're available by email, shoreaccess@rccl.com. And I like to say they're concierge service because what they can do is work with the guest. And a cruise may have 5 or 6 ports of call. And so my agent will work with the guests to figure out accessible tour option each port. Sometimes we have a readily made available accessible tour option, but sometimes we don't. And we sometimes can work with our regular tour operators to see if we can make that tour accessible. They just have to acquire an accessible vehicle, and many times we make that happen. Really, that's the best way to arrange for an accessible shore excursion at Royal Caribbean.
Okay, and that's very nice, and it's interesting because I know John Sage at least via Zoom. And he's done an interview with me, and we're working on getting set up to do some more interviews with some of his tour guides in various ports because I love being able to share what's accessible tours. My wife and I, we found some places that we really like that are very accessible, and we found some places that aren't. It was interesting in Grand Cayman, the port that can be a challenge, and because when we were there, the only ship in port was the one we were on that day that had a tender where you could actually roll off the ship onto the top deck of the tender. We were watching all of the other ships, and it was only one cruise line that had that access. Once you get ashore, Grand Cayman it's fairly flat, and there's quite a bit of stuff that's within easy walking distance that you can see and do. So we really had a nice day without doing any scheduled tours. But previous visits to Grand Cayman, and we'd been a couple times before, my wife couldn't get off in her wheelchair, which she had to either take a walker or she had to lean on somebody, and then we'd fold the wheelchair up because then we could put the wheelchair on. So it's just, again, it's one of those things that it's really nice to have that information ahead of time. Okay, so let me ask the next question. What accommodations do you make for the blind?
We have a wide variety of products and services that we offer to our guests with disabilities, and they do accommodate guests who are blind. We have braille and tactile signage on our ships. We have large print menus on our ships. If the guests would like, we can read the menu or the daily newspaper to our guests to provide accessibility information there. On a case-by-case basis, we can send some of that information to the guest ahead of time. They can preload it on their smartphone so that they can use their smartphone reader functionality to read off that information during the cruise. So we've been able to make that work as well. We do provide orientation tours for guests who are blind because our ships are quite huge, and sometimes guests may need just a quick tour of the ship to kind of identify where guest relations is, where's the restaurant, where's the main theater, where's the swimming pool, and then ultimately where's their stateroom. And once they kind of know that, they kind of get the lay of the land, and then they can just go around the ship independently for the rest of the cruise. Some of our guests who are blind bring service dogs, but it's not guests who are blind. All kinds of guests with disabilities bring service dogs on the ships, so we do accommodate those as well. Yeah, and the question I always get, is there a poop deck? Yes, there is. Not. We have a 4x4 relief, a foot relief area, and we use cypress mulch now. We used to use sod, but because we know some dogs are finicky. I mean, I can only go on sod, la la la, but sod doesn't hold up well in cruise ship weather. It's the salt air and everything. It doesn't last as long. So we use cypress mulch, and we try to make sure that we tell our guests so they can prepare the dog to go on an alternative surface during the cruise. Otherwise, little Sparky may have to hold it in for a while. No, we work closely with our guests to figure out what their needs are, and so we accommodate guests with a variety of vision challenges, whether they're blind or have low vision. We've got opportunities for them to have a great cruise.
Very nice. And so the next question is, what about for people that are hearing impaired?
So that's also a great question. And Ken, I don't know if you remember, I'm hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. You can't see it when I'm wearing the headset. I'm kind of lucky because I'm able to hear well with hearing aids. I talk well. I got a lot of speech therapy classes when I was younger. We offer a wide variety of things on board our ships for guests who have hearing loss or who are deaf. I really like the fact that we have portable hearing room kits. They make any stateroom on a ship hearing accessible. So there's a unit that sits next to the bed, and then there's a little gray button thing that sits underneath the pillow. It's called a vibrator. Okay, I'll leave it at that. And the really great thing about this is if somebody's at the door knocking, the white light will flash, and if I'm sleeping, the button will vibrate, and it'll wake me up. I have this at home. This is how I make my 6 a.m. calls with London. And the other great thing I like about portable hearing room kits is that if there's a safety issue, like if the smoke is going off in your room, then the red light's going to flash and the vibrator, or even the general alarm. We've customized the kits to recognize the general alarm signal. There's 7 short blasts, 1 long, and then if that goes off, the red lights flash and alerts the guests that they need to leave their stateroom to go to the muster station. So when I sail, I love to have these kits, and I feel extra safe when I sail on Royal Caribbean. We do have assistive listening systems in the theater, so you can hear all the great sound and music of our great production shows, like Broadway shows like Hairspray and Mamma Mia, and all of those really great stuff. I love musicals.
Now, let me ask, do you have, for those that, is there a way they can use TTY if they need it on board?
If they do, we do offer TTYs. It's kind of a outdated technology. Most people now have their smartphones. They connect to internet, and they can just communicate with their friends and family on the ship or at home. TTY is still available, but as an option, but most guests prefer to use smartphones for their communication.
Okay, so that shows you how out of touch I am. But that's okay. Every time I talk to somebody, I learn. It's an unending journey. And I will say this too. I like the concept of the portable kits because some cruise lines, if it's an accessible room, it also has that. So then there's a little bit of a challenge in it. Okay, now what do I need the room for? And the other thing is the first time you encounter one of those when you're not expecting it and it goes off.
Yeah,
Can be quite disconcerting because I remember the first time I experienced that. My wife and I were in bed, and I don't think we were quite asleep, but somebody called our stateroom, and we didn't realize the vibrator was under the pillow, and all of a sudden the lights are flashing. We're like, "What is going on?" Almost left the room in a state of undress because I wasn't sure if the ship was going down, what it was.
yeah, and I think there are opportunities to do better sometimes. And stateroom orientation would have been great in those situations. Say, okay, these are the accessible features of your room. Here's how they work, and all of that. So I think there are opportunities for us to do a better job of communicating those things to.
And that's part of what I try to do too with this channel, and when I do like room tours and stuff, try to show those things so that people have an idea of what it's like. Okay, so what about autism? Because I know you guys are good at that.
Yeah, so I love to talk about this because Royal Caribbean International was the first ever autism-friendly cruise line. We came out with the program like in 2015 14, yeah, 7 years ago. We've been catering to guests with autism and their families for years. I've been with Work Orbit for 15 years. It's through working with different groups and travel partners like Autism of the Seas. We work very closely with them, and we learn what it meant to accommodate individuals with autism on board of ships. Now, it's a neurological disorder, it's a sensory disorder, so they have a lot of challenges with things like a lot of lighting, loud noises, crowds, things like that. So, what we try to do is make our ships warm and welcoming to people on the autism spectrum. So the first question I always get is it just for people with autism? And the answer is no. It can be used for anybody with a developmental disability because most of the needs are similar, even though we don't like to homogenize the group because everybody is an individual and they have their own set of needs, but generally they have similar needs. And so the program that we put together, which you can find at our website, royalcaribbean.com/autism-friendly, and you get details of our entire program. So we offer things like sensory friendly movies. The movie is not autism friendly, but the environment is. And that's the whole point of the program. We do offer the Autism Channel, which is a streaming television service for complimentary. Now, we don't expect our guests to stay in the stateroom during the cruise. They go out and have a lot of fun around the ship, but sometimes they do need to get away, and sometimes families with autism need to get away and be in their stateroom. And there's a channel that has educational, entertaining program all about autism, so we offer that on ships. One of the really great features of our autism-friendly program that we love is we took something from the autism community that they use called social story. Now, social stories are like a guide, a picture book of kind of describing upcoming experiences. So parents and educators will use social stories to describe going to the grocery store, going to school, or going to the doctor. We created one about cruising. It's available on our website at royalcaribbean.com/autism friendly. It's a PDF. You download it from there. You can use the entire booklet if you want, or you can take pages of it and use that. We have heard so much positive feedback say, hey, Ron, we love it that you took something that we already use and made it for cruising. And so that was really great to hear the positive feedback that we got from our guests. The thing that we've learned ever since we introduced our program 7 years ago, the number of guests and their families have doubled every single year. You know, not last year withstanding, but still. So there demonstrates a unique need for a accessible vacation option for families with autism.
I want to commend you for the job you guys do with that. And I think the industry as a whole is becoming much more aware of all of the variety of challenges that people face and are working hard to try to accommodate them. And I think the industry as a whole, and I think Royal Caribbean is a good example of one of the companies that does a great job with that. So that's very nice. Now, I'm going to go back to my question that I kind of got ahead of myself on. So do you have tender ports, and are they accessible?
And the answer we have discovered is yes, we do have tender ports. We sail to 500 ports around the world, and almost half of these are tender. And so there's some options for all of that. You know, you just mentioned Grand Cayman. It's really, come along over the years in terms of being accessible. When I started, it wasn't, but then very quickly they became having these options of having an accessible tender. And sometimes also the challenge is with the ship. So one class of ship could be accessible in Grand Cayman, but you get a different size ship that, the door entry may be at a very different height where that ramp to the tender doesn't completely work either. And so then you still have to go down the stairs and all of that. Some of our ships that we use exterior stairs, we have platform lifts. That's on Radiant class ships. But you still need to get from the tender platform onto the tender. And sometimes the tender configuration, the minute you step in, there's stairs down. So there's lots of challenges there. So over the years, my team is building sort of this database that upon request, guests can talk to us about what options do I have in a tender port. You mentioned for certain guests who are full-time wheelchair users, guests who have scooters, usually heavy scooters, can't find it problematic because they're not able to sort of get from that tender platform area onto the tender. And the other challenge also is if we're able to even get you there, sometimes you would get to the port and you get onto that dock. The dock area is not accessible. So we've gotten you to the dock, but you're like, I can't get into town. So can be challenging. I think we've done a really great job over the years of working with the different ports and making them a little more accessible. I think that some of this will help you. I know that you had a question a little bit later on. I'll address it now. Some of our ships and some of our ports are better than others. So the recommendation is Oasis class. We have the world's largest cruise ships. We made a business decision that we would not tender that particular ship. We have about 6,000 passengers on that ship. If we were to tender, it would be like take all day to get everybody off and then take another day to get everybody back on. So it's always docked. So it means it's roll on, roll off capability. So that's one suggestion, recommendation I make. In the Caribbean, I would recommend an Eastern Caribbean over Western because Eastern Caribbean itineraries are almost always docked because your tender ports in the Caribbean are the Western Caribbean ports, like Grand Cayman, but that's accessible. But you then start to look at things like Belize and some of these other ports that are exclusively tender. So that's also a situation. Alaska is also a great option where a lot of it's docked, but occasionally you can do tender there as well. I know that if you go up to Canada, New England cruises, and you dock at Bar Harbor's got an accessible tender solution, but it doesn't completely work with all ships, as I mentioned earlier. We can help our guests and travel partners navigate those options, but there are some recommendations I can make that help people pick and choose. The other thing that I might suggest is, hey, when the ship is in port and it's tendering, take the opportunity to stay on board. It's quiet. Almost half the ship has gotten off, and the ship is quiet. You literally have the pool to yourself. The spa is wide open. They have discounts for going to spa on port days. So it's a really great day to relax on board and have a great time without the hustle bustle of the rest of the guests on board on a port day.
Okay, so now I'll tell one more quick story on ourselves. My wife and I, before I started doing travel videos, and my wife will tell you that I'm the only person she knows that can take a vacation and turn it into work. Because now I want to go and film and shoot video and try to put information together. But before we started doing that, a lot of times we would stay on port. We loved port days because if we'd been to the port, and a good example is Nassau. The last time we were there, we went and did some tours and had a great time. But if you just get off by yourself to wander around in Nassau, downtown Nassau is like downtown Cozumel. Well, Cancun's more like downtown Vegas. A lot of the cruise ports are so similar that we realized we weren't missing anything by staying on the ship, unless we wanted to go spend money on a tour. A lot of times we're pretty thrifty travelers, so we don't. But we loved being on the ship when everybody else was ashore. Like you said, the light of the buffet was good. Finding a table for sit-down dinner was great. It was easy, like I said, to hang out at the pool. All of those kinds of things were just so much easier. On your ships, especially your bigger ships, there is so much to do. I'm pretty convinced after doing what research I've done on your newest ships that you could probably spend an entire vacation on the ship and not feel like you'd missed anything because there's so many things to see and do on board.
Yeah, that's great. We have the largest cruise ships in the world, and we design them so well. We have neighborhoods, and the fact is that I don't go to a venue and feel like I'm crowded. Okay. Now, there's occasional times like when you're in the Windjammer Buffet, and sometimes when you're going to a theater production show, certain things like that. There is some lines and some crowding, but most often you're going to be on the ship and it's going to feel relaxed and comfortable because there's so many different things. When I cruise, I like options. Sometimes I know people love the smaller ships, and I like those because they're a little smaller, a little more intimate. But I like having choices. There's 5 different things going on at 8 o'clock at night. What should I do tonight? And there's options. Some of the smaller ships, you may not have that many options. And so it's really, I think cruising is a really great vacation choice.
Okay, so let me go to my next question, and that's about the spa accessibility. So are your spas accessible?
Yeah, so our spas are accessible. We do have an accessible treatment room with the table is adjustable height, so we do that. We take care to design spa areas and also the fitness areas to be accessible, or we make modifications when it's required. You'll find this on our newer ships that we're a lot more consistent. When you get to some of the older ships like Vision class, there's not great accessibility, but there's enough accessibility to cover basic treatments and certain spa experiences. And as you get onto the newer ships, the more accessible it is and the more options you have.
Okay. And so I see part of the answer just behind me over what to me is your left shoulder there. Yes. So you do have lifts for the hot tubs and the pools. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we do. We have at least one for a pool and one for a hot tub on every Royal Caribbean ship. Um, on some of our newer ships, like Oasis class and maybe Quantum class, we have multiple pools in an area. So we do have like sockets. So we only put up one pool lift, and we're able to move the lift as needed. So if the guest wants to use a different pool, we'll move the lift over there so that they can have access to that pool. So that gives our guests really great options.
Very nice. Okay. So when I show up at the terminal, what can I expect in the way of assistance to get me on board?
Yeah, so we like the airlines at the airports, we offer peer assistance. We offer wheelchairs and personnel to help our guests navigate the terminal and as well as getting on and off the ship. We do recommend that you let us know ahead of time. And the reality is that our guests come to the pier at many different times. So we're able to accommodate everybody easily and quickly. But sometimes we'll get a bunch of guests that show up at the same time. So our staff will then check the list and kind of see if there's anybody that's already told us they've had a request. Because guests who have asked for assistance ahead of time should be prioritized first. They should say, hey, I made a request for wheelchair assistance 6 months ago. I should get timely assistance at the pier, and we will assist everyone. For the other guests who just asks for help on the spot, they may say, it may take us a few minutes, just have a seat, and we'll bring a wheelchair for you in just a few minutes. So that's how the process works.
Okay. Those are the kinds of things that your travel agent can help you with. We can try to make sure that all of those things are seamless as possible. Okay. So what about oxygen on board the ship?
Okay, so we don't provide oxygen on our ships. We do provide it for emergency purposes in our medical facility. But we do allow guests to bring their own oxygen on board. And most of these nowadays are portable oxygen concentrators, called POCs for short. Before coming to Royal Caribbean 15 years ago, I was at Northwest Airlines, and Northwest was was the first airline to allow portable oxygen concentrators on board. That's when they were first being introduced almost 20 years ago. And the really nice thing is portable oxygen concentrators are like little suitcases, very tiny. It's almost like a typewriter, if people remember what typewriters used to look like, but that's the size. It takes sort of ambient air and makes it breathable oxygen. Okay, so this is what's called on-demand oxygen. So it's just in case if I have, I get oxygen. If I don't have, I don't get oxygen. Now, people with like oxygen bottles, another thing, that's more like continuous oxygen. Okay, and not many people travel with those because those are big, clunky, and difficult to do. So people who have portable oxygen concentrators, when they were introduced, really created a great option for people to travel easily because they have the range for oxygen bottles. They could just take their own machine because now it's covered by Medicare, and then they can just take it from the home to the airplane and then onto the cruise ship, and they have oxygen when they need it.
Okay, yeah, and I see that a lot. And then if they needed it in bottled oxygen, do you work with like special needs at sea or somebody to for so that they
Yeah,
can bring?
Yeah, so there's two options. Obviously, guests can bring their own, or sometimes they don't want to lug their equipment with them during the travel, the flight, and all of that. They can rent oxygen from one of our providers, like Special Needs Group, and they can arrange to have a portable oxygen concentrator waiting for them once they get into the stateroom.
Okay, that sounds good. What about guests with food allergies?
Okay, guests with food allergies, yes, we accommodate them. Food allergy is the second largest request after peer assistance. Peer assistance is our number one request. Food allergies is like the second largest request that we get. We accommodate most common food allergies. So let's talk about gluten-free because that's our number one request that we get. So in the main dining room, we will have highlighted on the menu which options are gluten-free. Generally, for our guests, we will bring the next night's menu at the end of the dinner and say, would you like to pre-order your entree for tomorrow, because sometimes the guest may say, I don't like any of the gluten-free options on this menu, but I like this one. Can the chef make this gluten-free? And our chef will work to do that. And we're very accommodating like that. We do have guests with complex food allergies that sometimes can't tolerate certain ingredients. We ask those guests contact my access team directly so that they can coordinate with the ship and the chefs to make sure that they know what their needs are, and then we can make sure we can meet them. The other things that we have about gluten-free, just getting back to that, we have a gluten-free station in the Windjammer Buffet area. The entire station is gluten-free, so lots of really, and that's on every Royal Caribbean ship. I love pizza. I love pizza at Sorrento's. It's amazing pizza. We do have a gluten-free option there as well. You do need to call ahead for that. We don't have gluten-free pizza sitting out there, but we will make it upon request. And so in about 20 minutes or less, so you can get gluten-free pizza.
Ah, very nice. Okay, so it sounds like you guys do a really good job. I really want to thank you, Ron, for being here today and for your time. And for those of you that have watched the video, if you have any questions about Royal Caribbean, you can put them in the comments. And I apologize, I should have mentioned that earlier. But if you put them in the comments, if I can't find the answer, I'll reach out to Ron. I've got his email, and we will try to make sure we get you the information that you're looking for. So again, thanks very much, Ron. Thanks very much for the group, and we'll see you next time.
See you. Thank you.